Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today for Creating a Sustainable Future. My name is Michelle Rapp. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations. I'm so glad that there's been so much interest in today's program on this important topic, and I'm even more excited to showcase the excellent work of our alumni who are making an impact on a daily basis in a variety of roles and organizations. And I know we'll get inspired to do more as we learn about their work. So we will have Leah Bamberger as our moderator. She is the Executive Director of the Northeastern Climate Justice and Sustainability Hub. Kate England is Director of Green Infrastructure for the City of Boston. Michael Green is Director of Carbon Markets with Native. And Rishya Narayanan is Climate Communications Strategist with the Conservation Law Foundation. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Leah.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and I'm really glad you were able to pull this together. We have a great panel, and looks like a really great pool of participants. So as folks come in, we'd love to just through the chat get to know who's here. So if you want to put your name and perhaps if you're a current student, maybe what program you're in, what or expected graduation year. And if you are already in the field, maybe just say a little bit about your role or whatever you'd like to share, just so we get a sense of who's here. That would be really great to see. All right, well, we're going to get things started, and I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, maybe starting with Kate, and then Rishya, and then Mike, to just share a little bit about themselves, where they're from, their background, and what sort of sparked their passion for sustainability. So with that, turn it over to you, Kate.
Great, thanks. Hi, everyone. Kate England, the Director of Green Infrastructure for the City of Boston, Northeastern alum, graduated in 2008. My background, I'm originally from New Hampshire. I grew up in a literal log cabin on the side of a mountain. My kind of understanding of the world from a very young age was that it should be green and wild and natural. And so when I went to college in Boston, I experienced for the first time a very different kind of landscape, a very urban landscape. I remember the first, several months, probably semester that I lived in Boston, being able to see into other people's windows was very weird for me. So I kept my shades down all the time because I couldn't even see other people's houses from where I grew up. So I think that what sparked my interest in sustainability was I did some dialogues of civilization while I was at Northeastern. I did two. One was the Geneva dialogue, where we worked at the United Nations in Geneva, and the other was the Egypt dialogue, where I took a slightly different path than most, because I had found a program that was being run out of the American University in Cairo that I was really interested in, and the professors leading the dialogue allowed me to spend some time working with that program. And so I think that my work or my experiences at Northeastern were largely responsible for my interest in sustainability and my early exposure to to the field. While I was at the UN in Geneva, I obviously got to see the policy side of what other countries were doing to address climate change and to adapt to climate change. And through my work in Egypt, I was able to see physically, climate change happening a lot earlier than we started to see the physical effects here in the United States. Monsoon cycles had already started to change in the early 2000s in Northern Africa, and so people were struggling to feed themselves. So there was a lot of kind of really nice visual there. So I think that was it for me. I will kick off to other panelists, but nice to meet you all. Thanks for being here.
Kate, thanks for sharing. Rishya, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Kate and Leah and Michelle for having me here. Really great panel. Really excited to be here. My name is Rishya. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Climate Communication Strategist at Conservation Law Foundation. I have been doing multimedia science communications and policy advocacy for over 6 years now. It's a wonderful, exciting field, and it's been a journey to get here. So we can go way, way back to baby Rish in New Jersey with her face pressed up against the glass at the Camden Aquarium looking at the penguins. I have always loved animals. I've always loved the environment, but I was told very early on that I was bad at biology. So science wasn't it. I was not going to be a scientist. We held off on that dream until college, where I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology. And I said, I don't want to do research. You know, I love people. What else can I do with this degree, with this experience that touches people, but also combines my root passions? And I was like, all right, maybe I can bring back up environment. You know, it's not biology, but what else can I do to be involved in the environmental sector? And it was science journalism that exposed me to this much larger world of environmental science communications. What that means to take an issue that is impacting our world and also impacting people and use it to achieve a goal, to achieve laws, policies, change, protection, conservation, whatever that might be. And it's been a beautiful a journey since then. I've been in myriad of places, from marine science conservation at the global scale to local harbor conservation at the Boston scale with Boston Harbor. And currently I am working at the regional level all across New England at the climate mitigation scale, working to figure out how we can harness the power of clean energy, make sure everyone can access those benefits, and move off of fossil fuels so that we can slow the impacts of climate change. So thank you again for having me here. I'm so excited to be here, and I will pass it off to Mike.
Thanks, Rishya, and yeah, thanks to Northeastern for having me. I was super excited to re-engage with my alma mater and get to learn a little bit about y'all and share my journey and what I'm up to. So I guess, yeah, by way of background, I'm currently in Vermont, where I live. I've been living in Boston and kind of actually like hung out between South End and JP for the last 12, 13 years, even after graduating, hung out. But up here now, feels a lot more like home because I'm from the Central Adirondacks in upstate New York, a small mountain town called Inlet, New York. And about 250 year-round residents. Majority of our economy over the last 100 years was switched from logging industry during the Roosevelt governorship administration, not presidential administration, to over to winter tourism. So the snow economy really is what floats us. And we've got a huge board in our town hall, and it has the annual snowfall year over year. And actually, while I was at Northeastern, I took the pleasure of mapping that. And what I saw was that over starting in about mid 1990s, we saw a lot more winters where we didn't hit this 200 inches per year claim that we always had. Some years it even dipped down into below 100. And that was really kind of a horrifying thing for a lot of folks to better understand, because you know, the snow economy, we're a lot different than Boston up there. A good winter for us means that we're able to open up businesses in late November. The snowmobile trails, ski trails are open in late November, and that basically floats the economy till mid-April. We get a little shoulder season, and then we can go into the summer break. But what happens when there's not snow? Now that tightens that winter window. And if we're not able to have an economy that's open, then you get all the challenges that come along with unemployment and with the challenges of living in a remote rural place. Hamilton County, in my home county, New York, has no hospital. It's the only county without a college actually in it, in the state of New York. And it also ranks usually in the bottom 3 for income per household. And so this is a community and group of people who absolutely need this snow. They, need it beyond what we like kind of joke. And, earlier before this call, we were talking about how much we love snow days. But for us up there, it was really the lifeblood of the economy. So I was always driven to want to be able to do something about climate change from as soon as I started to understand the real impacts for my whole community. And I went down the science route, environmental science, and also did my first co-op with the Bureau of Land Management out in Utah. And I remember seeing a graph that said the forests in upstate New York were more closely going to resemble the forests of the mid-Atlantic by predominantly like the end of my lifetime, by 2070. And that was horrifying to me. My family was given land in upstate New York to come fight for the Union as mercenaries during the Civil War. And during that, 170 or whatever years since they came over here, we've moved about 30 miles down the road. So we're more or less in the same place that since we came to this country. And the stories and the relationship to nature that I learned are things that my grandfather and my grandma told me about the forest. My parents had a big influence into what I want to bring to the next generation. So not knowing my own woods horrified me. Unfortunately, at the same time, it was 2008 as I was reading this article, and my parents said, well, because of the economy collapsed, you can't go back to Northeastern. We can't afford it. So I dropped out for 2 years. I went and worked for Greenpeace, Rainforest Action Network, all the big environmentalist groups. I stayed around the Boston area. At the time, towards like 2010-ish or so, I think Leah was starting to work with the city of Boston. So I was hounding her as an advocate quite a bit. And I really cut my chops in the advocacy space. People said, but you're a college dropout. You're this like Greenpeace hippie activist type. You don't know anything about the science or the policy or the business. So over the next couple of years, I really got to work in a lot of different fields, internships and career paths to figure out where my best leverage point is. And one of the things that I've really settled on is engaging the private sector and working with the private sector on climate solutions. And it's fortunate enough that's what I get to spend every day doing, helping them think about their own carbon footprint, as well as thinking about the kind of impact that they want to have in the world. So we'll talk a little bit about that, though, later on. Leah, thanks. Back to you.
Thank you. It's so great to hear everyone's stories and how we're all connected to this issue, and particularly how our environments shape and influence our passions. So thank you all for sharing that. And just real quick, a little bit about myself. My name is Leah Bamberger. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Climate Justice and Sustainability Hub here at Northeastern. It is a new group here in planning real estate and facilities. Really excited to kind of elevate the work, the sustainability work on campus, and help connect it to the movement at large. So thinking about how Northeastern can support the goals of the communities at which we're a part of, and really connect our academics and research to solving those real world problems and addressing the climate crisis, particularly with a focus on climate justice and racial equity. My background is in local government. I've worked for the city of Boston, as Mike mentioned, and also most recently the city of Providence, Rhode Island, where I was the director of sustainability and helped develop the climate justice plan there. So it's great to be here, and we're going to turn it back over to our panelists, this time starting with Rishya, to talk a little bit more about some of their current work that they're doing. So I'm going to share my screen, and each one has a couple of visuals to go along with this. There we go. All right, Rishya.
All right, so let's get into some Wong. To start off with, one of the reasons that I really enjoy working with Conservation Law Foundation is because when it comes to climate solutions, it is an organization that thinks at the systems level. So when we visualize the change that we need to make to slow climate change. Eating plant-based is great, recycling, turning off your lights, that's all really great to start acting on climate change. The real way we're going to make an impact is by working together and tackling these really, really big systems level issues. We're talking corporate accountability, like Mike said. We're talking agencies that kind of benefit from anonymity, or entities, I should say, not agencies, because that's government, that benefit from anonymity in maintaining status quo and not changing. And one of those entities that CLF is working with, and that has been a project of mine over the last year or so, is reforming our regional grid operator, ISO New England. Now, what is ISO New England? I'm sure many of you haven't heard of this before. I haven't heard of ISO New England before I started working at Conservation Law Foundation. This is an entity that manages how and what electricity is bought and sold and then delivered into our homes across New England. So they essentially manage the markets where electricity producers can sell their electricity, and then utility companies can use that to then deliver it into our homes, where we can use our appliances, where we can turn on the lights, where we can heat our homes if you have electric heating. Why do we care about ISO New England? Why do we care about this big entity working on electricity? Well, we care because ISO New England historically, for over a decade now, has created rules and systems for these markets, for their operations, that prioritize fossil fuels over clean energy. And as many of you know, fossil fuels, these are the ones that spew climate damaging emissions when burned. So really the root of climate change is fossil fuels. Now, across New England, we have climate laws. 5 out of our 6 states have climate laws mandating cuts to these climate damaging pollutions by 2050, some net zero by 2050, like Massachusetts. So really, we have our communities calling for a clean energy transition, saying that this is what we want. We want to slow the impacts of climate change. We want to protect the health of our people and our environment. Yet we have our regional grid operator who is managing that electricity, preferring and elevating fossil fuels rather than helping us foster that clean energy transition. So what should our regional grid operator be doing? They should be leading on this clean energy transition. They should be working to figure out how the infrastructure that delivers electricity can support things like offshore wind, can support things like energy storage, so that if there's an extra windy day, we can save some of that energy for when we have really high peak demands, like during cold snaps or extreme temperatures. And they should be helping states, working with the states to achieve those climate laws and policies. This isn't just about numbers, right? We're talking about the safety and the livability, is that a word? I don't know, the livability of New England and its residents. We're talking about families not having to live near explosive pipelines. We're talking about families not having to worry as much about frequent flooding or cold snaps in which they have to choose between putting food on the table or heating their homes. So this is where CLF's work comes in, and this is where one of our more recent projects come in. We're working both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, I don't know if that's a saying, but I just made it one, to ensure that ISO New England can make that change and can start leading on climate action. We work at the technical level, attending stakeholder meetings, attending conversations that are not open to the public, using our expertise in law, policy, markets, engineering, so many different things to enter the conversation and hold ISO accountable for acting on climate change and incorporating climate change into its decision-making. And most recently, what we've done is launch a public media campaign to put the spotlight on ISO. ISO New England for over a decade has been using scare tactics, essentially, to call for more of these polluting fossil fuels like natural gas, warning of mythical rolling blackouts that New England has not experienced up until now, as a reason to build more pipelines, to pump more gas, when this is not what we should be doing. If we want a reliable, affordable, clean future, we need clean energy. And so we've taken back that space in the public sphere using op-eds across all 6 New England states so that people know who ISO is, so they can't get away with these decisions anymore, and so that they're held accountable to meeting what New England residents want and moving in a way that preserves a livable world for us. So that's one of our projects. Again, systems level. It's not, it's not as tangible as turning the light off, but it is the kind of big change that we need to make an impact, and change that we need everyone's support on as well. And I think
important work. Thank you so much. And I'm sure many of you are coming up with questions, and I just ask that we're going to have plenty of time at the end for Q&A with the panelists. So jot them down or make note of them, and we'll get to them. All right. Next, Kate.
Thanks, Leah. Hi, everyone. So we were asked to talk a little bit about a particular program or project that we are working on that we're really excited about. So my role with the City of Boston is essentially, or was created to increase the implementation of green infrastructure throughout the city, both from the city's projects and public work that we're doing, but also from our private property owners, developers, and institutions, and all of our non-public entities as well. So in the past, one of the primary barriers to installing green infrastructure in Boston, and this is a problem that exists kind of across the country and the world as well, is that we are generally reluctant to install things that we are not sure that we are going to be able to maintain. And I've spent a lot of years, before I joined City of Boston, in July of 2022, working for the state of Massachusetts. And then before that, I worked for Boston Water and Sewer. So most of my work has been in the public sector, trying to figure out ways to get more green infrastructure built, to get it integrated into projects out of all of our different city departments, to get it integrated into our projects coming out of the private sector. And again, that kind of primary pushback that we've heard, you would think it would be cost or, uncertainty or unfamiliarity with technologies. But most often it's, we don't know how to maintain it. We don't have the resources to maintain it, the know-how, the staff, so on and so forth. So one of the programs that I am working on at the city right now is building a green infrastructure jobs pipeline. And again, based on a lot of the experience that I've had, in my career, it became very clear to me that, one of the reasons why maintenance was so difficult, it was a lack of trained, qualified, certified individuals who are familiar with what is needed to maintain green infrastructure features, and that are part of businesses and others that are bidding on contracts to do that maintenance work, or even just applying for jobs at the city. When we post positions for maintenance staff, we're not really getting those qualified individuals who have experience doing this kind of work. So this pipeline that I'm working on has a bunch of different steps intended to capture individuals at different ages, but also at different points in their career. So for example, we have some curriculum in the Boston Public Schools that I helped write back when I was with Boston Water and Sewer years ago, that is for 5th and 7th grade, and it introduces stormwater as a concept and green infrastructure as a mitigation measure to students in 5th and 7th grade. So, my kind of initial thought was get this in front of people as early as we can, because I personally didn't hear the word stormwater until I was in college. So that was kind of like our step one entry point. And then we have a bunch of green teams and other programs that exist from nonprofits and others throughout the city. So how do we make sure that students who expressed interest in stormwater and green infrastructure in grade school are getting connected with those green team programs that exist for youth employment for 14 to 19-year-olds, when they're in middle school and high school. So making connections to the existing green teams in the city so that students who go through BPS are getting into those programs. And then once you've had, people who've gone through a green team program and really enjoyed it and maybe want to make that their career, how do you get them into a program like Boston Power Corps, or, into one of the many training programs that I'm going to be hosting through the city of Boston to get people trained, certified, so that when they are applying for jobs in the maintenance field, or even just standard landscaping jobs, that they've got credentials and experience that give them the leg up to get those jobs, but also gives us a more qualified and experienced workforce when we're putting out contracts. And then, once we have people kind of like in those various roles, both, with city positions or at landscaping companies, or, nonprofits that are doing work in this field, or groundskeeping companies, making sure that we are providing work to those individuals. So we're looking right now at how can we at City of Boston contract in such a way that maintenance contracts and construction contracts are going to individuals from the neighborhoods that we're building these projects in, individuals who have gone through our programs, who have gotten these certifications. And again, that's kind of our way of trying to, to build this qualified workforce, but also to keep the jobs within Boston and make sure that we are bringing people along, from our neighborhoods, so that we get that sense of buy-in and ownership and pride from the people who live in our neighborhoods. I'm also building out a green infrastructure office at the City of Boston. So there will be positions there as well that I'm hoping to hire some of the individuals who have gone through my various programs in the past. We have an individual who is going to be teaching there's called the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program training that we're hosting. We're going to be hosting multiple sessions of that throughout the year. Hopefully moving forward, I'm hoping to do about 4 a year through City of Boston. But the individual who's going to be teaching our first training in May of this year was one of my participants back when I worked at Boston Water and Sewer, and I taught the training initially. So, individuals who have taken the trainings with me in the past and are now becoming trainers, for future programs moving forward. So really hoping to create those connections and to help walk people through, from grade school all the way up into careers in green infrastructure.
Thank you, Kate. All right, Mike, love to hear what you're working on.
Mike, I think you're muted.
You're muted.
I'm sorry about that. I was just fanboying over the stormwater photo, so I'll just have to follow up with Kate in email on that one. So yeah, as I said in my kind of like opening and kind of background, one of the things that really stuck out to me is the opportunity to engage and work within the business community. Coming from a small town and with a strong small business tie, and if you could tell, one of the things that drove me was the impact that climate had on our economy and on our small businesses. And one of the things that I also feel very passionate about is that a lot of the small business leaders and people within that community have such an amazing opportunity to use their voice and get engaged in public policy. And they're always perceived different than maybe the environmentalist college dropout kid might be received, right? Their employers, their taxpayers, they're what keep people thriving in place is our small business community. Yet they're heavily underrepresented in the conversation around public policy and climate. It's usually grow our economy and be pro-business or support climate change. And actually this morning I was sitting down with a Wellesley professor talking to him about, if you look at the IRA jobs that have been generated already, it's like 78% in red states, right? So we know that these decisions can be making jobs, and they're making jobs in places that maybe don't agree with the decisions in the first place, which is kind of a fascinating thing to get into, but we'll save that for another time. So I spent a fair bit working as the executive director of an organization first called the Climate Action Business Association. I launched that after graduating from Northeastern. We grew that to about 400 and some odd businesses that we were engaging across the state in climate and energy policy. One of the things that really stuck out was their interest in putting a price on carbon for various types of reasons. Making polluters pay favors small business community who are doing the right thing. So that was something that they really stood out and wanted to be supportive of. Because if you're a small business versus a big box store, of course, you can be a little bit more nimble in some ways with your carbon footprint. And other ways, you're also being more responsible for your community. So they were quite interested in this. And I'm now on the other side of looking at carbon markets and carbon pricing as a policy measure, and actually looking at it as an investment tool. So Native has designed, developed, and invested in hundreds of projects. We've been around for about 25 years. So I'm the newest to the team. Started it there actually in January. And my job is kind of quite simple. We have various companies, corporations who will reach out to us and say, look here, this is a part of our supply chain or a part in line of our business modality that we want to decarbonize. But without, for one reason or another, that's outside of their core competency. It's maybe outside of their own ability to manage and support. And also it becomes challenging for various reasons geopolitically as well. So what we'll do is we'll step in and essentially act as a investor, project developer, supporter, and then act as the direct liaison to whoever the project implementer or community group that we're working with. So I've got a couple of projects and companies that we're working with here on my slide that I can go over. So first, we're up here in Vermont. Native is about 50 or so % of the staff is also up in the greater Burlington area. And as any good environmental company in Vermont would be working with, Ben & Jerry's, of course, is one of our lead clients and somebody that we've been engaged with for a very long time. It's a fun project in that, Ben & Jerry's is sourcing their milk for their ice cream from all over, depending on their supply chain and need. But one of the big emissions challenges that they have is, of course, the methane emissions from those farms. And so we're working directly with them, where we came in with some project supporters, technology firms essentially, that have manure digesters that we can take the cow manure, collect it, put it into a digester. From that digester, rather than that methane just going out into the atmosphere and having added global warming, they're able to capture it and reuse that in other industrial processes on the farm, predominantly for energy. Or it can go right through continue through the biodigester and come out as biochar on the other end. And then that biochar is a tool that we can use in further agricultural processes. So making sure that those emissions don't escape, but instead that byproduct is being used in order to further the farm and the farm's goals. Now, it's a great example where Ben & Jerry's, they want to be working on the next ice cream flavor, the next big thing, the next American dream, if you will. But they're not certainly going to come in and try and find who's the best biodigester facility provider for various rural farms around the world. That becomes a big challenge for someone else to take on. We're happy to play that role. Next to it, a little bit about Cliff Bar and our relationship with Cliff Bar. Sometimes we do the not exciting things for Cliff Bar or others, where I have to go out and procure various renewable energy products for them to guarantee that their factories and manufacturing processes are staying fueled by 100% renewable energy to meet their needs. So we just went and procured the renewable energy needed for their new kids Z-Bar line. I have a 2-year-old, so I thought that was pretty cool that I actually got to play a role role in a product that's in my cabinet, and also something that, we're regular consumers of. But this is a pretty fascinating project. The picture of the camels next to Cliff Bar is in the northern rangelands of northern Kenya. This is predominantly pastoral communities spread across 1.9 million hectares, who their previous decisions on how to use the grasslands was basically entrenched in conflict. Whoever was there and was the strongest got their hands on grassland and grassland usage. And so this added to a lot of instability in the region and in the area as well. So Native has come in with a partner group on the ground, and we're funding and supporting actually a range management program for this region that we've got 17 of the individual tribes that indigenous communities that live there in the region to be supportive of. And they're actually getting to see real money through the carbon sequestration, carbon removal that's happening in their soil. They're actually getting to see that direct investment back into their community, building schools and other institutions that they otherwise wouldn't have, which has been really, really exciting and a really, really challenging project as well. We have a small team on the ground there actually in the conservation zone in northern Kenya. And our conversations last week was about how they couldn't get from one area to the other because of armed marauders of some sort out on the road, outside of the community, coming in to essentially take over or try and use some of the pasture land. So it's certainly not to say that we've solved all of the problems in the region, but it's creating, true economic opportunities back into the region. The last two that I'll touch on pretty quickly here, Taos. This is a project that I didn't ask if I could talk about it, but I'm really excited about it as an avid skier and snow athlete. One of the things that we're getting to work with the ski resort Taos in New Mexico on, they're a long-term partner. We've done several different things in the Four Corners region with them. But if you guys remember last year, northern New Mexico and parts of Southern California a few years prior have been absolutely destroyed by forest fires. And this is right out in Taos's backyard. So we're working directly with the ski resort. They own a few other different companies in town as well, working with them to help support and build out and support the forest services reforestation programs in the region, and making sure that we do it such with a way that's fire resilient. You can never be fire resistant, but you can be certainly fire resilient with your planning methods in the region, and making sure that we're supportive of building back those really important forests, restoring the watersheds that are dependent upon them, as well as making sure that we don't make the previous mistakes that have done over the past 100 years. Last but not least, this is Palau, this is RMI, Republic of Marshall Islands photo. Rural community in Republic of Marshall Islands is looking for ways that they can access climate financing in order to support economic growth on their islands. Blessing and a curse, we have an open visa program with a lot of the Pacific Islands. Most youth get on the next flight once they have the opportunity to Guam, from Guam to Hawaii, Hawaii to LA, and don't look back. There's a huge issue with brain drain, skills, younger generation fleeing. Why? Because there's no economic opportunities. So working directly with the government of the Republic of Marshall Islands, also working closely with the government of Palau to see if there's ways that we can create climate finance opportunities to create jobs and create investment into these communities, while also making them resilient to sea level rise, and kind of thinking about their futures and their ability, again, I'll say it, to thrive in place. So my job is really to do some of the initial vetting and screening of these different types of investments, which is really exciting because sometimes I'm talking to a corporation about the inline or within their industry, the challenges of decarbonizing tricky spots. And then other times I'm talking with the head of state of a small island country about how that same problem that corporation could be solved by creating an investment vehicle and project on the other side of the planet. So it goes a lot deeper than that, but I'm happy to talk about all those other projects and some other things you might be able to find on our website. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks, everyone. Really, really exciting and interesting to see all the different ways that you all are tackling these issues. Sorry, I gotta get my windows in order here. So I would love to see if folks have any questions. I have a bunch, but wanted to take a minute to open it up. And I would encourage folks, if you feel comfortable, turn on your camera so we can see you and engage and have a conversation. You're also welcome to put questions in the chat. You can use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to ask a question. In a minute here. All right. Tori, floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you all. These are really inspiring stories, and I hope all the students and everyone here is soaking it in. I'm wondering, you're all in these places in your careers where you're doing incredible work, where you've made connections and partnerships and moving things forward. Wonder if you could speak a little bit to like times when you maybe had setbacks where people weren't on board and how you sort of transgressed. How did you get beyond that and keep moving?
I'm happy to jump in there. So the field of green infrastructure, despite the fact that we're literally using natural solutions to manage stormwater and become more climate resilient. And it's kind of the oldest of old solutions to these problems. Up until the last few years, I was met with a lot of resistance, a lot of pushback, a lot of, no, we prefer the kind of gray solutions that we're more familiar with or that we've always done. We know how to maintain them, we know how to build them, so on and so forth. And so a lot of the work that I had to do kind of early in my career was normalizing the idea of this new kind of approach to managing stormwater, this new kind of resilience, toolkit that we had available to us. It was a lot of public education. It was a lot of speaking to groups like this. It was a lot of going to meetings and explaining what a rain garden was, so it was really, starting from that nothing baseline and building the knowledge about stormwater and green infrastructure in the city. So lots of early frustration, to say the least. And a lot of it was just kind of like, again, putting in the time to keep proposing these solutions, to keep showing examples, precedent examples of successful projects, to keep pointing to peer cities that had programs that were functional and successful and laudable. A lot of my kind of early career setbacks, at least in my field, I'm not talking about personally because there are those as well, but were, the best way to kind of get past them was to just keep showing up and just keep talking about it. And, little by little, you gain support. So that was my experience in my field. Climate change was I had a professor actually say to me that climate change is a myth when I did my capstone presentation back in 2008. And so, so we've come a long way, even just since, I was an undergrad with understanding climate change and kind of our toolkit to address some of the issues that we're experiencing now.
Thanks, Kate. I totally agree with, just showing up and being there. I want to address this question from an internal standpoint as well, not just people we work with in an organization to make change, but also within the organization itself. I find that a lot of hesitancy to change up systems or change up the way organizations operate is unfortunately and very candidly, I will say, rooted in a lot of isms, ageism, sexism, racism, and frankly, what is antiquated environmentalism at this point. It is exhausting, but it is a fight that we all have to take on and work on. And I think my suggestion is to, and from my personal experience, is to find those organizations and those job opportunities where you believe that fight is worth taking and change is possible. Because there are some organizations, unfortunately, where that's not going to happen. And it's happened in my personal experience as well. So yeah, I think exactly what Kate said, and value your time and energy and value the fight that you are willing to give, and put that fight in a place where you're going to make change.
Couldn't agree more.
Great answers. Mike, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just say, kind of riffing off of what the previous two said, don't be afraid to break the rules either. And because a lot of the rules are antiquated, a lot of the things are the way they are for not the right reasons, just because the person who made the previous decision before you made it based on their own interests and beliefs, and that's not always right. And so there's a lot of instances and challenges that I came across, dropping out of school. I was, lots of challenges that I had during those times, where had I just said like, okay, I got to play by the rules and go back to my small town, I'd be working in the back of a restaurant or at a gear shop. I wouldn't have been able to stay in the climate, climate industry or with a focus on something that was like the big opportunity and the big challenge that my life calling was for. And one big piece that I constantly coming back to was, not being able or not being afraid to break the rules. But maybe we'll have another time that's not career focused. So I can talk about what rules were broken and how. Maybe let's save that for like an activism and climate justice panel for a different time.
There you go. That sounds great. We have another question here that came in through the Q&A from Bree, a career changer. And so the question is, for people who don't have previous experience in conservation, environment, or green jobs, but have loads of professional experience elsewhere, what are some of the roles you see that could be a good transition role?
Ooh, can I jump on this one, guys? Is that cool?
Please.
This is because I always get this. I get this all the time. Just somebody the other day, I don't think he's on here. Zach, cut me off and tell me to shut up if you're on here. But someone came to me, another alum, works for a sweet tech job for Monday, the program software company. SaaS, that's the word I'm looking for, the SaaS company. And he came to me and was like, I want to make the jump to the climate space. Like, what can and how should I be doing it? Like, how do I need to reimagine myself? I'm like, what? Hang on a second. Like, you're, as this person has asked, like a subject matter expert in this thing and in this field. And guess what about the climate movement? We need everyone. We need artists, we need doctors, we need scientists, we need creatives, we need SaaS companies to get involved. We ended up talking about how climate finance projects need program tracking software in order to make sure they hit deadlines and find ways to be the most impactful. So it's not always you have to reimagine yourself or do some kind of a career pivot, because like, quite frankly, like we need every type of career and every type of person to be involved in this movement at this point in time.
Yeah, I just want
go ahead, Rishya.
If it's okay. I didn't start out as an environmentalist. I don't have a hard science background. I started out in psychology and sociology, decided I wanted to do communications, and then decided out of passion that the environmental sector is where I wanted to go. And I think, 10 years ago, when I was looking at jobs, this wasn't the case where you could come in with an intersectional background, but times are changing. Those areas that only look for environmental backgrounds, that only look for the hard science backgrounds, they're no longer sustainable. I use that word in a different sense, I guess. They're sustainable. They're not hiring anymore, right? So the really pivotal organizations, the really great jobs, they're the ones that are going to look for your subject matter expertise, like Mike said. So don't change who you are, own it and advertise it and market it. And we need it. The environmental movement isn't just environmental.
Yeah, totally agree. I was pre-law originally at Northeastern. My co-ops were at law firms. I couldn't agree more with Mike and Rishya on this one, that, we are looking for individuals coming from all different sectors at this point, because climate change and climate resilience is really multidisciplinary. It's cross-denominational. It really touches all the things that we're doing, and we need everybody kind of on board for this. If you are applying for jobs and you are finding that you're trying to find a way to make yourself stand out, I would say in your resume, highlight any experience that you have that maybe is, related to the environment or sustainability or things like that. And then in your cover letter, be real, be really honest. I'm making a career shift because I think that, this is such essential work that we all really need to be part of. And I want this to be my everyday. That kind of narrative is really helpful to those of us who are currently reviewing lots of job applications. And then the other piece is, I mentioned the National Green Infrastructure Certification Program. There are lots of mini trainings and certifications that are out there. So if you want to find a certification or an area that you're really interested in and take a training and then have that certification on your resume, that shows a commitment to your shift in career. So just throwing out a couple of ideas that might be useful for people trying to break into, but you know what I mean? Trying to get jobs that are, kind of strictly resilience, strictly sustainability, coming from a field where maybe that's not what you've done historically.
Yeah, and great responses. And I just want to jump on that cover letter comment and back to storytelling, right? All three of you did a great job in the beginning here, talking about your story and why this is a passion of yours, and connecting it to what is most important to you, your home, your upbringing. And I think those are great examples of how to demonstrate your commitment and your passion. I want to also emphasize networking, and I have a question about networking, but I also want to leave time to address this question of how you, a couple questions here that touch upon work-life balance and how you find hope in the work. So I want to end on that question. But first, any comments on networking? We always hear networking is so important, but how do you approach that, and how has that served your career? And you all don't have to answer because we're short on time, but if one or two feels called to respond to that, great.
Do you mind if I chime in quick, everyone? So I can't express enough, the number of times that I heard networking is so important, and never really connected with what that meant until, this point in my career, when I think that networking is more than just going to events. It's actually forming friendships. I get the majority of my work done at City Hall, and have, in my previous roles, because of having friends in other departments, people that I made time to foster an actual relationship with. So when I have a question or a need, I'm able to reach out to somebody who I actually have a relationship with, and who hears from me, not just when I need something from them. So just recommendation to everybody who's listening, take the time to have coffee with people and actually form friendships with them. It's worth it, and it will get you so much farther in career jumps, in advancing your personal career, in getting stuff done at your current job. So take the time to make a friend is my advice.
Yeah, and I just add some great resources you guys have in the greater Boston area. CIC, I think every Wednesday or Thursday, they have an open house where you can go in, and there's free beer, or there used to be. I hope there still is, because that was sweet. And you can sit and just chat, and they have usually a couple of presenters will talk about different things in the climate or new tech space that they're in. But it's a great kind of coming together of the industry and of values aligned people. And then also Greentown Labs is, right up the red line from y'all. They also do open houses. I believe it's the first Thursday of every month. Also free beer at that one. But also it's great to kind of walk around, see the different startups. The team there has done amazing things. to build a community over in Somerville. And so those are some great ways you can just show up. You don't even have to know anyone, and start talking to companies and start learning and, start building your community if you're kind of early in that journey.
And I want to add to, I highly agree with what Kate just said about being friends and making friendships. Again, in complete candor, networking early career was really difficult for me because I couldn't find a lot of people that looked like me, and I didn't have the experiences to share that other people did. My family doesn't own a house on the Cape. I didn't go surfing. I'm not a skier. My family was never a skier. I couldn't relate the way that some of my colleagues would relate to executives with those stories. So friendships and finding my allies, that was the great start, right? Meeting people, finding a bond with them, developing that trust, and then not only just working together, but passing on opportunities to each other. And one other thing I want to plug, if it's okay with you, Leah and Michelle, is that because of how difficult me and some of my colleagues found networking to be as people of color in the environmental field, in a frankly very homogenous field, we created a group called Professionals of Color in the Environment. It's completely free, and this is my bird Nico jumping up on my shoulder. The entire point of the professional networking group is to network. It's to create pipelines into the environmental field for people of color. It's to facilitate a space of joy and catharsis for people of color, and it's to pass on opportunities where we have them. So I'm gonna put the Google group in the chat. The only requirements to joining, and again, it's free, are you have to identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. You have to work in or live in Massachusetts, and you have to be interested in learning about or working in the environmental sector. That can be anywhere in the environmental sector, right? Technology, science, public health, communications, like I am, teaching, whatever it is. So please join if you fit those requirements, and we hopefully will help foster a networking space for you as well.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Great resource and great advice from everyone. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask to share in a word or a phrase how you maintain hope in this field and that some resemblance of work-life balance, at least. Anyone feel called to share quickly on that front?
Full disclosure, it's an area I struggle maintaining work-life balance. Hope I have no shortage of, but I think for work-life balance, working on it is where I'm at. There's a lot of passion here, and so it tends to bleed over into my personal time. I feel very strongly about the work that I do, and so I need to remind myself to make space for myself and my needs and for self-care. So working on it. And then for hope, I think administration change has been amazing in Boston. So like I'm feeling really hopeful right now, and I'm getting a lot of support from just like a lovely new generation of people who've come in with lots to offer.
I just say on the optimistic side, I'm very much a glass half full, or maybe I just got a smaller glass and the glass is completely full kind of mentality. I'm absolutely a climate optimist. As somebody who has been working in advocacy and in this space in different capacities for over 10 years, the fact of what we've seen transition and happen in that time frame is just absolutely astonishing. We're doing it. We're winning. Whether we're horrified, but I honestly believe that we're winning. On the work-life balance question, though, get hobbies. Hobbies can't be scrolling. When you have a hobby that you're passionate about and you have work that you're passionate about, it cuts down on maybe some of those toxic traits or other things that you're trying to eliminate from. So, get outside and figure out what's that right hobby or thing for you to allow your brain the time and space to escape that it needs, and get passionate about that.
I don't have a problem with work-life balance, because I say that so shamelessly, because you can't fight if you're not your full self, right? I can't bring 100% of myself if I only have 50% of myself. And yeah, this is an important movement. Your health is more important, and you being a living human being is more important. And if you're fighting for other people's right to live a safe, healthy, joyful life, then you should do the same thing for yourself. And in terms of hope, I think the friends that I have made throughout this career has been a tough one, especially early career. And the friends that I have made, the relationships that I've developed, the love and solidarity I feel from my colleagues, that's what gives me hope, right? Because it's a tough field. It's sad. It can be disheartening. There's so much gloom and doom, and you need people to be able to lift you up, and you need to be able to lift others up in the same way. So find your allies and show them love and give love in return.
What a great note to end on. We're a minute over, but thank you everyone for hanging on. I just put the link if you want to join the Climate Justice and Sustainability Hub's newsletter and keep in touch with what we're doing here at Northeastern. Thank you all for joining. And Michelle, do you have any closing remarks?
Just thank you to our panelists and to Leah as the moderator, Rishya, Kate, and Mike. Such passion in what you're doing. I wish we had at least a half an hour to keep going here. It was not enough, but really helpful to hear specifically about the projects that you're working on, because they're coming from all different angles. So I think it just gave all of us a lot to think about and be hopeful about, and to think about where we might want to get involved and have an impact. So great to know the work that you're doing. We appreciate it, and you inspired us. So thank you. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everyone. Go Huskies.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all.